right, good evening and welcome to the May 11th, 2020 school committee meeting of the town of Foxborough. We're here, some of us are in person and some of us remotely for our May meeting. Brent Reuter and Rob Canfield are with us remotely and the rest of us are present in the gala room at the town hall. So we're going to start with our COVID-19 update with Dr. Berdos.
All right, I'd like to first start off with acknowledging that last week was Teacher Appreciation Week.
Yes.
And we had some wonderful tributes to our teachers last week by many different people. And the first one I'd like to point out is Amy LaBroche, who's an IGO parent, spearheaded, along with Director Mike Weber from Foxboro Cable Access, a video tribute for teachers. And Tina, you were on there as well as part of that video. And there were hundreds of pictures that were submitted by our parents and guardians in Foxboro with such just wonderful images of students and hashtag Foxboro Teachers Rock and pictures of them thanking teachers and set to music. And it was just such a wonderful tribute, and it was so well received by our teachers. It brought many of them to tears. They said that, and I know that I myself was one of them.
It was fantastic, and I actually have asked Mike if after we adjourn our meeting, he's going to play the entire video, which is almost 20 minutes worth of photos and videos. So he's going to run it right after our meeting tonight. So if anyone is curious and hasn't already seen the YouTube video, stay tuned after the meeting for an awesome chance to see this great video.
It was fantastic. And then we also had a surprise by our wonderful Patriots the Craft organization. And every year for Teacher Appreciation Week, they always do something for our teachers without fail. And even though they are not in the buildings, what they did was put up their name and lights on the Jumbotron at Gillette with each of their individual names and thanking teachers. And then this afternoon during the high school faculty meeting, we had a surprise appearance by Joe Toohey.
Oh, nice.
Yes, so he joined in with the faculty meeting this afternoon, so we had all of the high school teachers on the call at the same time, and he thanked them for all that they're doing. He talked about how he's even in the middle of finishing up his MBA and through online work, and he couldn't even imagine with teachers having to turn that around where that's not something that we've done, and to be able to do that immediately, and just had such appreciation for what they've been doing. And so he also did a shout out to John Arecchia, who is one of the teachers that will be retiring. So that was a great surprise to all the faculty.
That's a great surprise.
On that call. So he's number 62 in case anybody wasn't sure, offensive lineman. As far as other updates, we're committed, as we've said before, to really honoring those end-of-year activities the best that we can. Some of them are easier to plan. We've talked about scholarship night and class night at the last meeting and how those will be virtual. And thanks to Foxboro Cable Access, we're going to be doing a lot of pre-recording of those speeches and having those air on the actual dates. Graduation is one that we have been working really hard to plan for. Talked about last week at the last meeting that we were going to submit a survey to students and parents of seniors to get some feedback to help us, not for them to make that decision, to help us guide our decision. We have taken that information. The participation rate, honestly, was not that great. We had a 39% participation rate from parents and sent it out twice, and 49% from students. But again, it's information that will help us with all of the many things that go into the decisions that we make going forward. We are still waiting on guidance as far as from public health from the governor. I know there's many surrounding districts that are at the same place that we are, because we want to make sure that what we plan we can do. With that said, we are in consultation with Foxboro Board of Health, with the police department, with the fire department, even with Foxboro Cable Access, because they're such a wonderful partner. And we'll have more information just as soon as we get that guidance from the governor that will let us know exactly what we can move going forward. We'll get that turned around. So again, we're not announcing anything this evening, but hope to do that just as quick as we have more guidance from him.
I'm sorry to interrupt you with a question. I know seniors' last day was supposed to be next Friday, and it is next
Correct.
Friday. but the traditional drive around the common is not something that is going to happen. But I have heard, through my son, actually,
Yes.
that their class advisors and the administration are working with Chief Grace to do a car parade at a later date.
So that parade it is a function of a town event,
Right.
not by the schools, but yes, we're working with Chief Grace. I even talked with him again today. May 22nd on that date.
Yeah.
That's the last day of AP testing,
right.
so that date won't work for that, but we are working with the police department so that we can have something that is going to be similar to what they've had in the past.
And be safe and honor,
Absolutely.
the current public health guidelines as well.
Yes, so the high school administration is working with class advisors and class officers, but we're in conversation with the police to what that would look like, even though it's been a town event, to be able to have some of those celebrations that our seniors look so forward to.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. And as soon as we have specifics out, we will get that out just as quickly as we can. We know that some people are frustrated that other districts have put out their plans. Some have put out plans and are having to take those
Yeah.
back. So there's a lot of information that we have to obtain to think about what that's going to look like for our students to be safe. I will also mention that, I've had students come forward and say with the state police graduation that took place at Gillette, that's very different.
Yes.
That is very different from high school students and being in a place to where we know with the state police, they were arriving in individual cars, they could not have family members, they were 6 feet. We know that they are there to enforce the laws going forward. It's not the same. It's very, very different. So we are working with all of the stakeholders that I mentioned in order to plan for graduation, and we'll get that out just as soon as we can.
On the day of the state police graduation, Governor Baker made it very clear that it was an exception for the state police because he needed those new troopers to get to work. So
Absolutely.
It's not a comparable situation at all.
No, it's not at all. As far as our remote learning, we know how hard parents are working at home too, and that came out in some of the teacher appreciation messages last week as well. We are continuing to move forward. We've used the data from the surveys to really inform and adapt those remote learning plans going forward. I sent out a communication on an update with WebEx, the other platform, on Friday, and we hope to have the bug that's on their end fixed, so we'll be able to have that as an alternate video platform. At the same time, we are continuing to see more students engaged with teachers at different levels, which has been really good. And the commissioner's letter came out late Friday night, and that was sent out over the weekend to parents and guardians with more information specific to high school students as well. There's a lot of questions that are there, but it also made it very clear that we're still awaiting many other pieces of information as far as guidance going forward. The elementary principal, middle principal, high school principals are continuing to send out weekly updates. I think those are really important to watch for. There's a lot of information. As an example, this week, library books at the elementary level are to be dropped off and returned. That's in their letter. At the middle school, course selection, all that's gone out for students. At the high school, talking about picking up belongings. We'll work with seniors first because their last day is May 22nd. So there's a lot of information that's going to continually be sent out, and not just weekly. It'll be more than weekly at times based on that information. So it can be overwhelming with the number of emails that go out, but please watch for those. And at any time, if you have any questions, check the COVID-19 page on our website. Reach out to the teacher, reach out to the school building administrators as well. But we really are focused on continuing learning remotely, and we hope that all of our families and students continue to stay safe. And we're just really appreciative of all of the juggling that many are doing in order to make this work in the times that we're living in right now.
Well, thank you for the update. Does anyone on the committee have questions for Dr. Berdos on the update or anything COVID-19 remote learning related, I guess, other than the budget, which is a later part of our meeting? So, Rob, Brent, anything? Nope. You good?
Sure. I had one just point that I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Burrows for is that the COVID-19 website continues to be updated with all that, and so that just it's a good reminder. So thank you for that. And I think just speaking only anecdotally, personally, that it's easy to get lulled into waiting for communication to come to you, but just to, it's been nice on my end and people that I'm allowed to contact virtually, the teachers have been very, very responsive. So just to encourage people to keep doing that, because it does work.
It's a
At least I
great
hope
resource.
It does for me. And then the other question was, you'd mentioned that in the last update that there's a process for working through team meetings and things of that nature for IEPs and the like. What's been your feedback or feedback you've garnered from faculty and others regarding how I guess how a couple of things, how the elementary video chats have been going, and then the other one is some of those other kind of more specialized service for student services that people might be receiving via video or remotely.
So as far as remotely, the team's video conferencing at the elementary level week 2 was smoother than week 1 as far as checking in with students. As far as the special education piece, those individual remote learning plans have gone home. The service providers, like for instance, if it's looking at therapists, those are like weekly challenges. They use Flipgrid. They use some of those other platforms in order to communicate. The team meetings have started with parents. I talked with a teacher this morning, and that those have started virtually. I think that one of the pieces, the questions, is that live teaching. And so the live teaching, it's asynchronously. It's working with students asynchronously, not synchronously, meaning it's not in real time. And some of that we might see depending on services with some students, but that's going to be more an individualized program.
Thanks.
Do we have any other COVID-19 update related questions? Richard, anything?
Just many thanks for all the work you do.
It takes a village. It's everyone really working really hard and very differently.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for the update. And our next item is open public comment. We did receive one comment via the school committee inbox from our friend Joe Garrity. And Joe would like to know, some of it you touched on in your update, but he asked if you could provide an update on how students at all levels, including middle and high school, will be able to get their belongings from their lockers in the coming weeks. And his second question was, with phase 2 of the Burrell School renovation project beginning earlier than June, have students at the Burrell Elementary School been able to come into the school during the last week and a half to grab a trash bag of their belongings from their desks? So those are Joe's two questions.
So what has taken place is last week, all of the middle school lockers were cleaned out with students' belongings put in bags with their names. They will be contacted at a later date to pick those things up. At the elementary level, staggered schedules as well. We started with the Burrell because of the construction.
Right.
And students, again, belongings were put together by teachers and with names, and that actually is going to be delivered to the IGO for parents to pick that up, and they'll be hearing from the principals from each of the schools. So it's being done in a rollout fashion, but with those belongings taken from lockers, put in bags. And at the high school level, it's starting with seniors. Because we'll need to let them keep their things until the 22nd, but then they'll be hearing about when to pick those items up.
And to return their own books.
And to return their books and such. So it's not where students will be coming into the buildings.
Right.
It is the teachers and the custodial and maintenance staff and administrators, actually, who have been emptying those lockers and putting students' belongings and labeling those. And then there will be information forthcoming about picking that up.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Joe, for your comment and question. All right, our next item is approval of minutes, and we have in front of us the April 27th, 2020 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments, questions, additions, revisions? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve these minutes?
I would move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you, Beverly. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the April 27th meeting minutes? That is 500. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Planning for Success update, Dr. Berdos.
So the Planning for Success is our new plan, our strategic plan going forward. And we have a 28-member team that's been working on that this school year. And we've so far made a lot of progress, but it came to a screeching halt, obviously, in March. And we still had a number of meetings left for that. We attempted to, where those are half-day planning with the group, we attempted to have one meeting with the smaller team to start breaking that into 1 hour chunks of time, if you will. We're not going to be able to come out with a plan by June by doing this remotely. It's just too important of a plan to be able to be thoughtful, for it to be meaningful, and the process to really give it what it needs. And so as a result of that, we will not have a plan for you in June, which I think is understandable based on what we're going through right now. So we will continue to do some work during the summer, and then we'll finish that in the fall. At this point in time, we have, again, accomplished a lot. We've developed our 4 themes. We're at the process of developing the objectives and then the initiatives, which then a action plan will come from that. But we were working with Dr. Whitner, who is helping facilitate that group, and it just became very clear that in order to do this well, we needed to pause and to be able to spend the time over the summer and go into the fall. And at the same time, what we're experiencing now with remote learning and all of the things that we're learning as we go, it's going to inform that plan much more.
I would think so.
I think that it makes sense, it's the right thing to do, but I just wanted to let you know that you won't have a plan in June for obvious reasons.
It makes sense to take the time to do it right, and certainly to take into account what we are living through right now, rather than make a plan that doesn't account for the rest of this story.
Yeah. Because we know that all of the stakeholders are so important to have their voice, and if they're not able to be there and to really do the work in a meaningful way, it doesn't make sense.
Having worked on several of the strategic plans with Bevy in the past, those face-to-face meetings and brainstorming sessions and breakout groups, it's such a productive means of doing. I can't imagine how you could replicate that in a Zoom, format at this point. But do you guys have any questions on the plan for success, timeline, anything? No? Okay. Richard?
Nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. And so we'll plan on September, you said?
Yes.
Okay. All right. It's going to be a busy fall.
Yes.
For sure. All right. Our next item up is the Project Lead the Way update with Dr. Mello.
Yes. Well, really, I just wanted to share that at the middle school, we are expanding our program in the fall. So we'll be bringing 6th grade on for Project Lead the Way. Last year, we had a small group of 7th graders who participated in the design and modeling module. That is really supposed to be the launch module for the whole program. So beginning it in grade 6 makes perfect sense. So we will move it so that every 6th grader can experience it.
Okay.
And then we will continue to have through the applied technology and the electives. Sorry. I'll move over here. We'll continue to have the opportunity for grade 7 and 8 through applied technology and electives and a little bit of B-Core with Mr. Doherty. He will continue to do the design and modeling with those 7th graders next year who didn't get to have it as 6th graders. And it'll be great because he'll be able to collaborate with the new teacher who will be doing it. So we're excited about that.
Very excited.
That's our first level of expansion. And as we talked about, we will look ahead, hopefully in the fall, to possibly bringing on a course at the high school in the future as well.
Great.
Yeah, so just a quick update on where we are.
That's great. It's good to know that those things are still happening as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Very good. So does anyone have any Project Lead the Way questions before we move on? Brent?
Oh, Dr. Mello, are you doing grant funding for that, or just kind of adding the programs piecemeal through just the regular programming?
No, it's a good question. The way that the original grant works is it's a multi-year disbursement. So they'll be giving us our second level of disbursement next year, so we're able to fund it through that. And then once you add an additional school, you can apply for the grant again. So if we go into the high school, we'll be applying for a new grant for that. That's a good question.
Wonderful.
That is a good
No, that's good
question.
for startup costs.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for clarifying.
Is there a new teacher that needs to be trained?
Well, yeah, the teachers will, as we add modules and as we add more teachers teaching them, they'll need to be trained. So it'll be
Existing teachers.
existing teachers who are there, yes.
Next year it'll be existing teachers.
Oh, for sure, right. It's all the teachers that are
So then you don't have to send
there.
anyone to training, which may not be happening anyways.
Right. Well, they have always had virtual training opportunities, but we
Okay.
have always felt very strongly, to your point, Tina, that the in-person training is really the most valuable, but if it's not available, we'll take what we can get. We'll also be adding a new module in 8th grade, because last year the 7th graders and 8th graders in applied technology did the same module, but now the 7th graders will be moving up, so we'll be adding a new module for the 8th graders.
They're great.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
Very exciting.
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Did we lose Rob?
I think so, he was flashing
He
there for a
was.
minute.
Okay. All right. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Back.
Do you have another question,
back.
Brent? Good. Glad you're back, Rob.
Thank
Do you have another question, Brent? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the update on that. That was a good question on the grant money. And our next, folds into our next item on our agenda, which is the implications of COVID-19 on the FY21 budget. Mr. Yukna?
Okay, I think, first of all, there's obviously a number of concerns out there from a revenue projection for the town. So I thought I'd kind of give a quick update on where the money does come from
Thank
that
you.
supports our budget. We have three basic buckets of funding that comes in to support the schools. One is about $9 million that comes from Chapter 70. That was supposed to be lottery-based, but I think that's changed over time. The second and the largest of the three buckets is taxation. And then the third bucket is kind of a grouping of grants, revolving funds, and the circuit breaker. Circuit breaker being the largest of the components to that. Those are all funds that are based on circuit breaker, in our case, is what we received this year, so we know that that's a guaranteed amount. And that's just under $700,000 for next year. And then the balance of grants and the revolving accounts are pretty, well, the revolving accounts are steady because, again, we carry 1 year in reserves on those. And the grants have been pretty solid. There's only one large one in that, and that's Title II, which basically has been pretty consistent over the years too. So I think we're not too concerned on the grants or the circuit breaker, but we are obviously at risk with the other two because, well, we're not with taxation because obviously the town side of it is your taxes won't go down, unfortunately. But Chapter 70 itself is based on the legislature. So depending on the expenses that are incurred this year, obviously that's going to be less funding that's available for next year, and the fact that the state is taking a revenue hit from the fact that businesses aren't producing the same levels of income, therefore the same levels of taxes won't be out there. So there is anticipation that the Chapter 70 money will be reduced. I think Bill Keegan and George currently are thinking in the 10 to 15% range. I think they've actually cut the budgets by 14%, the assumption, the revenue projection by 14% based on that. As far as our budget, I think you all remember we basically are sitting with a 5.4 person reduction due to enrollments, and we have 3 position increases due to sped. So those are either program-related or service-related issues. So we still have a net reduction of 2.4, and again, we've already taken into account what our enrollments look like for next year to get down to this budget. Our actual salary levels are a minor increase. Our biggest increase is sitting in our sped out of district. And of our almost 1.4 million, $1.38 million increase in total, our out-of-district tuitions and transportation for that is $1,250,000. So as you can see, the majority of the money that we've asked for, that's in addition to what last year's funding level is sitting in costs that I don't want to say we don't have any control over, but in a lot of ways we don't. It's based on children's IEPs. It's based on placements that were best for them to service their needs. And under state law, you will fund that before you fund anything else. So those are not optional to us, and unfortunately, they're very large increases. The concerns I have for next year's budget, ironically, are not in a downward trend, they're in an upward trend. If we have any type of curtailment, as we expect that we will have relative to service delivery coming into the fall, we're going to have a number of things that we're going to have to address. Facilities. More than likely, we will have to have a higher level of cleaning, whether it's daytime cleaning while classes are in place. We will obviously have to do much more disinfecting type of processes, which we don't typically have to do on a regular basis, along with our cleaning. So I'm a little concerned about what we may have or run into with custodial timing to be able to accomplish this. The secondary part of that is obviously having the appropriate PPE equipment for our own staff and people coming into the building, as well as disinfectants with Perel or something like that, not only at every doorway that you're coming into the building, but around the building, as we started to have at the end of last year, or at the end of this year, I'm sorry. Our food service model may be very different. We may not be able to service the children eating inside the cafeteria and may have to go back to classrooms. If we do that, it's a much longer time frame for food service to be able to prep and deliver that type of food versus having 3 shifts of children come into a cafeteria, again, extending what our costs will be because of staffing requirements. And obviously, one of the bigger ones that we're incurring this year is technology. We are running into additional costs in software and other products just to be able to do what we're doing online. We don't see that as something that's going to go down. We see that as potentially something that we're going to have to continue to reinforce just in case the virus does take hold and actually forces us to go back out again. We need to be more prepared than we've ever been. And again, that's just increased cost in the technology lines. So I think from an overall budget point of view for FY21, there is a concern on revenue, absolutely. There is a concern on our expense side going the opposite way instead of down, but going up. And there's a concern that really, when you look at our budget, 81% of our budget is salaries, 19% is expenses. Of that 19%, almost 60% of it is special ed. Almost 15% is facilities, utility cost, cleaning. Technology represents 3%, and transportation represents 4%. So 81% of our expense budget, if you will, is relatively fixed cost, because I haven't figured out yet how to drop utility costs beyond what we have with all of the efficiency programs we put in. And I really don't look at either one of those 3 areas, facilities, technology, or transportation, going down, considering the way that we probably will have to operate. Even buses, something as simple as bus routes, we're going to probably have to figure out a way to disinfect 26 buses traveling around town on a regular basis. And that's obviously going to be not only equipment related, it's going to be staffing related to get that done. And it's going to maybe delay us just in being able to get kids through school. So there's a lot of concerns we have there.
Do we even know if we can have the same number of kids on a school bus
Well,
on a route?
that's the greatest question, because quite honestly, if we can't and you have to go to half of that, that means it's twice the time to get the kids to school. It's going to be delays on both ends. So there's too many unknowns at this point, but most of the things, we are trying to look at every single aspect of our operation and what the cost related to dealing with those are. And again, there is no silver bullet here that basically shows us a way of having less cost to perform all of the services that seem to be looking like we're going to be facing. But that being said, obviously we have a budget, and that's what we're going to have to try to live within as we move forward here. I think the other concern, and it's going to lead right into the next topic, which is the CIP budget itself. But I'll leave that for a second, so if anybody has any questions in this area.
Brent, I know you have some questions for Bill. Did you have questions for Bill? Do you want to go first?
I usually do have questions for Bill, but I just mostly because I like hearing how he answers things. I can defer to other people who can go first, if anybody wants to.
Would anybody else like to go first? Richard? Debbie?
It's very clear.
You're up if you want to go.
This is where I practice wait time. Bill, just for my own reminder, and perhaps anybody else who wanted home, of the three revenue buckets, what's the rough kind of breakdown? You said
Excuse me.
that most stable is was what, around 700?
So
Okay, you
the
said?
Chapter 70 is around 9 million. The grants revolving and circuit breaker are just over 2 million, and taxation is 30,500,000.
All right. And when it comes to the Chapter 70, and I realize it's a sea of unknowns, but when it comes to both Chapter 70 and the 30.5 on taxation, is that 10 to 15, the 10 to 15% drop, the safe current estimate currently?
I think it is. I think remember the taxation side of it is based on the property values within town. And that's not going to have a decrease relative to taxation. So that number is pretty much a fixed number. The two buckets in town that are going to have a financial ramifications would be, as I said, the Chapter 70, which I think the 10 to 15 is reasonable. It gets much below that. There are communities, that would not be able to really survive those type of cuts. I'm not saying Foxborough would survive it well, but we would do better than I think a lot of communities could do. So I think the state's going to realize that, so that's going to be one of the issues. But the other major component on the town side, where part of taxation comes from, is local receipts. Local receipts, the largest drivers within local receipts basically is our hotel and restaurant meals tax. However, that meals tax money is not part of our operating budgets. It is what's funding our OPEB payments, and it's what funds some of our road work. So fortunately, the town took a very smart move when they did that years ago to keep that separate and not allow it to become an operating budget component. Therefore, it's about a $1.1 million current revenue source. If it were to drop to zero, all that means is that we would not do some of the road work that we've previously done, and we would not pay our OPEB liability for the FY21 year. If it drops to 600,000, the decision could be made to put all 600 towards OPEB and not do road work, or pay the road work side you want to do and put only 400 towards OPEB. So the OPEB liability is not a requirement of the town. It's a long-term, obviously, best practice. But in a situation like this, it is an option that we have not to deal with. The other local receipts, when you really look at it, we always have basically assumed that the stadium would only give us what their minimum guarantee is in our budgeting. So that doesn't change because it's the minimum guarantee, whether there's a person in the seat or not. The other local receipts that will adjust will be things like permit fees, will go up and down. But I don't see the local receipt side triggering, tremendously. But again, things like auto excise taxes, which are under local receipts, you're still going to get your tax bill for your car, no matter what happens here. It's going to be the same level. So really, the big mix here is the Chapter 70 money. And again, I think that I think it's very reasonable. I mean, we've seen that happen to us before in tough times, when there was a state revenue decrease.
You actually hit the next two questions, so thank you. I find that very helpful. And then I know you already touched upon it, but just if you could just recap, is there any aspect other than timing of on the cost side of the borough projects or other ongoing non-CIP related maintenance and things that you see being impacted.
Well, at this point, the Borough project obviously is funded and continues to move forward, knock on wood.
I will.
So I think from that perspective, cost-wise, we're within budget. We don't have anything really that's coming at us that we're concerned about there. The obvious only major issue out there is at any point in time, the project could be shut down for COVID-19 reasons. But to date, that hasn't happened, and we will continue to keep our fingers crossed that it doesn't. We have been able to get them in. The teachers did and Michelle McCarthy did an absolute marvelous job emptying out all the classrooms over last week. And the custodians were right behind them, and literally we boxed up. We rented crates from a company, and we basically filled 500 of these crates. And we filled about 6 dumpsters at the same time. So a lot of stuff left and a lot of stuff got relocated, but we virtually emptied out 2/3 of the building for the contractors to have an extra 2 months worth of time to work on. As I said at the last meeting, I don't really look at this as we're going to get 2 months ahead of the project. We had a very, very aggressive summer, what they call summer slammer, which is you're trying to get in 10 weeks done, what you probably should be doing in 3 months anyway, or 4. So now we have 4 to do 4 months worth of work is the way I look at it. And my hope is that we just come back to a better product in the beginning of the school year than we might have had this not been the case. So, but again, I think everybody, I have to give very, very hard marks to everybody out there. There wasn't a complaint out there. The people were happy to, kind of move things along, and literally to empty out that amount of a building in a week is just, it's outstanding. It really
I
is.
actually saw on the Borough PTO's Facebook page that Mrs. McCarthy filmed a video of the now empty school, and it will be broadcast tomorrow on Facebook. So I'm going to keep my eyes open for that, so we can see the empty school ourselves.
Yeah, so from an expense point of view, Brent, I don't anticipate any increases or any other costs relating to that. If we were to have a shutdown, that would be basically a time delay. It would not be a financial delay. And the only thing that the time delay could hit us on is if we had to close down for 2 weeks on a quarantine period. We're not supposed to be in doing phase 2 already, so that's 2 weeks of time that they're not supposed to be doing that they'd have. It's really, the concern is the pre-K and the gym that's being built, because we need that space for September 1st for classroom space.
swing
So
space, yeah.
losing 2 weeks in that process could be painful. And obviously, we'd have to do a lot of different ways to try to catch up on that part of the schedule. So what was the second part of your question on that?
Brent, what was the second part of your question?
I think you actually inadvertently hit that too, which is awesome. I guess a follow up to that: is there any? I know we're getting really good rates before. Is there any trigger for a point at which we restructure any of the debt related to those projects? Or
we actually talked, I talked to George and Bill a while ago when we were doing this actual bonding for the borough and for the water project. And the reality was, prior to Randy leaving, there were a number of projects that had been consolidated and refinanced. So from a cost point of view, there's really not a lot out there that's sitting at high rates. And the cost of actually doing it might not make it quite effective at this point. So I know they are looking at potentially still going out to bond the big water project. I think it's about a $14 million. No, it's about a $7 million project, I believe. And if they do that, obviously that would be the right time to look at any other ones that might be out there that are at a higher rate, because combining them is the best way to consolidate the cost.
All good questions, Brent. I think the central theme is that there's a lot of uncertainty here, and we're going to have some information to digest as the summer goes on here.
Yeah.
So I know Wednesday night, the advisory committee is looking at the budget and the CIP requests, and we did post it as a meeting for all of us. They've asked that Amy Bill and I be present here at the gala meeting room, and if the rest of the committee would like to participate remotely, we'll get you the Zoom link so you can join in and, you know, be part of the meeting as well in the discussion.
It's to hold the numbers to the
Yeah,
required
yes,
amount.
it's to keep, because they have, you know, the chair of the Board of Selectmen is also going to be there, and Mr. Keegan.
Not that we're unwanted.
No, very much wanted. Thank you for clarifying that. I
Right,
should have
I just-
stated that better. But yeah, no, it's to keep the numbers in this room, just as we're doing here, you know, with our sort of half and half remote and present population. So, yeah, so we'll have more conversation with the advisory committee Wednesday night about this. But I appreciate the summary, Bill. I think we're going to have a lot to think about going forward, because our budget number we put a lot into the number we put forward in January, and very solid on that. But now we have a few other things on our plate that we will need to address. So.
Actually, I remember what your second question was. Second question was, coming out of this year, the financial possible impact. So obviously, and I've been saying this for a while, our interest is to hold our cost as low as we possibly can for the balance of the year. We think we have successfully filed for the extraordinary relief under circuit breaker, which will be spent this year on that $500,000 that we are over. We're not sure exactly how much the amount we will get. Typically, in the circuit breaker calculation, it's 75% of the cost. So if we can get, let's say, $300,000, and that would quite honestly take a lot of pressure off of the 500 we've been trying to come up with. My hope, quite honestly, is that we bolster what we return to the town at a higher level than we've ever done before, quite honestly, as much as we possibly can, which would actually put the town in a better free cash position, because that basically goes right back into the calculation for free cash. I assume the town side's doing a very similar thing, partly because there's not a lot you can do when you can't, work on projects with 6 people, whether it's road work or whatever. It's a lot tougher to do some of these projects that way. So I think we're all looking at this as an opportunity to try to return back to the town a larger sum of money from the FY20 budget that could hopefully be something that helps the town in the FY21 budget as we move forward.
That's a good point. Thank you. Brett?
Well, thank you for catching that. I appreciate that. That actually because a lot of the yes, thank you. I appreciate you catching that, because the I think a lot of people have a much more favorable outlook in terms of the budgets that have already been voted on by school committee and versus waiting for the other shoe to drop for the following fiscal year. So thank you.
Yeah, I was going to just suggest to keep doing updates too. So I appreciate you stepping forward to give us this update too. I do think it's going to be necessary, because we don't know where we're going to be in 3 or 4 months. I'm confident we're going to be different in some way, right? I'm not trying to state the obvious, but even if we're allowed to fill buses to capacity, we're still going to have to disinfect buildings and be more attentive in different ways, of which we didn't budget for at this time. So I think we're going to be there in the budget discussion. It's going to be at our forefront. Right. So I don't know if it's once a month or whatever we decide, but not to get into the minutia, but to just keep us informed so that we understand it and everyone understands that it's going to absolutely be different than kind of what we planned for.
Yeah, I think the one of the biggest issues that pretty much all of the districts in the state are concerned about, and that is the inability to have town meeting and have these budgets put to bed already. Can create, obviously, if you don't get to a budget by June 30th, you get into a 1/12 budget, which is a very hard process to deal with. But the other side of that is there's a lot of uncertainty when you're doing it too, because if we all know that for schools, a 1/12 budget for July and August, we're not doing anything. We don't really have our cost involved at that point in time. Our cost starts in September, and it's much more ramped up when it gets to that point. So that uncertainty, and the other part of that uncertainty is if you tell us at a later date that we have a financial issue, well, we've already spent money, and it's hard to, and we've already committed to salaries and staff, and so it's much harder to do anything in that basis. So a lot of the districts, I mean, I think we all are very concerned about that environment, but I fully agree with what you're saying. I think each meeting we go here, we'll hear a little bit more from the state on what the positions are. Obviously, at this point, they're kind of like us. They're just trying to get through the current problems before they worry about what the next level of problems are going to be. But they, everybody is talking about it. This is not, my group with all of the business managers. We have pretty much a weekly call with the state, and we're all smart enough to understand that there's some serious financial interest coming back at us, so that we're going to have to understand.
And it's every group within the town, too.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
So all the things you stated about food service model, about this, you've talked to all your department heads in town, I'm quite sure is already. And to say, we got to start talking, we got to be attentive, we got to be ahead. So I appreciate that. So people should recognize that this isn't coming out of a vacuum. This is coming from extensive conversation for everyone to plan forward. And I'm sure you're working with department heads on that.
Well, and I think that's, quite honestly, that's one of the beauties of the way Foxborough is set up, with our own facilities departments, with our own, control on food service and stuff like that. We have our department heads at our sides all the time. So as we're starting to look at some of these things, we're asking them to understand how the model can change and to do research on their own sides and report back to us. So I think it will be something that we'll be able to report back on each one of these as we're going, and we do have very good people in all those positions. So I'm very comfortable with the information that's coming. Food service in a lot of ways has done a lot of things different in the last couple months, and we'll do some more going forward that they probably never thought they would do, but they've done it very successfully, and they followed all the state guidelines, and they've done the funding requirements against all of it just as they're supposed to. So that's worked out really well. Custodial wise, we're maintaining the buildings. We're going to do our cleaning a little earlier this year. Guys are already getting ready to start on that. Basic concept there is we need to get all the other 4 buildings done, because by the time we get the Borough School back, just before school starts, I'm going to have to overstaff that building with probably half of my staff to get it done in a week. And we know that, we understand that, but by being able to get the other buildings done, earlier, basically gives us that ability to do it, so.
Good. Okay. Rob, did you have any questions? Rob, did you have any questions?
I did not.
Okay, just making
No,
sure.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Brent, did you have something else before we move on to
Just,
CIP?
no, I wanted to thank you for the level of detail in that. And I know when we do our regular, cycle of budget discussions, you walk through all those buckets, but I think it's an important time for everyone to kind of be reminded of those. So I really appreciate you giving attention to that. It helps me, and I'm assuming it helps other people at home. And it's especially what strikes me is being, again, because it's always helpful, reminded that, only 19% of the school's budget is expenses, meaning not salaries. And so if you're talking about, if heaven forbid, we talk about more cuts on the future, well, we know what we're looking at, because it's going to end up more on that end of the scale than other things. So, I appreciate the clarity that you laid this out with. I meant to ask it before, and I apologize for circling back. With the current kind of remote learning situation, have there been any changes to the district placement tuitions, or are all those programs still functioning as they were?
The out-of-district tuitions. Yeah, the out-of-district tuitions, actually the rates are structured by OSD, which is a state group. They structure the rates, and they're the only ones who can adjust the rates. There is a large group of business managers that are trying to get a reduction in those out-of-district tuitions. But remember that the out-of-district groups are now servicing those same children remotely. And probably the one area that they can't service quite as well, obviously, is specialists. But they're still working on trying to figure out ways to do that. They can't send people into the homes, obviously, based on the current situation. But that's, without that, the guidance basically there is we're trying to do something. What we're asking for basically is to see if we can get some tuition breaks on some of those services to help us cover for other services as we move forward. But it's likely most of those providers will provide the services that they're required to provide as best they can under state law.
Okay. All right, if there are no more questions on the budget side, we'll move to the CIP plan.
Sure. So the original request for the CIP was $558,500. The only item that didn't, well, two items didn't survive the original appropriation, which was the music, $75,000 for music replacement, so that was removed. And then in a revision, out of the full-size buses where we had two, we dropped down to one and one mini. Based on the current financial conditions, the decision was made to greatly reduce the CIP across the whole town. So the only two items that are left that are going to be in this year's annual request would be the 100, which is exactly half of the 200,000 for computer cost, and 82,500 for one minibus. The one minibus is the one that I've told you is basically DOT has told us is off the road. At this point, they will not re-register it for us, and that obviously is for both our special ed and other services that we use, so we're going to need that back. The computer side of it basically is what supplies our computer hardware, software, network upgrades, firewalls, all of that. The 100,000, quite honestly, is the bare minimum just to keep everything licensed and operating in place. The concern we obviously have is that with all of these, and I, was very frank with the conversation when we were doing this, is that what I'm hoping this is just a postponement to a later date, depending on revenues, because we are going to dig ourselves into quite a hole when it comes to buses. Will be now 2 buses be backwards and 2 more coming at us, because we do 2 a year. Having to support 4 buses in a single year is going to be very hard to do. The computer software and hardware we've actually put out more equipment this year than we've ever put out because of the COVID-19 situation. We've got I think it's about 150 at this point that have been distributed. Those are our frontline computers that we typically would use within classrooms that we need to have back, but we obviously have to make sure that they come back in operating shape. If not, we're going to need to have to support some of that as well.
And we still have requests coming in for those at this point in time, because families are finding that their home computers don't have either the capacity with the video conferencing, they are breaking, and so now they're coming back and asking for an additional computer, or at the same time, the sharing of devices in a household has become very challenging. So when we're saying 150 deployed, although we're 7 weeks into remote learning, we're still having requests and daily pickups.
Right. So I think, our request went from the 558 down to 182,500, 301,000 basically was deferred to a later date, and 75 was totally eliminated for this year.
So there.
I mean,
I don't know, it is.
Tough choices.
Yeah, it's just tough choices, right.
It's unfortunate. I mean, the minibus is a safety thing, and we need it. We have to have that because we can't keep running the one we are running. And, cutting it down, I don't think we've ever seen such a need for technology in our district.
Like you said, it's the
as
highest
right now,
level.
that it's. I don't even have the right words for it. It's ironic, I guess, that we're cutting our technology requests at a time when we probably need to increase it. Right. But we're doing our part, which is what we have to do right now to make this work for the budget, for the town meeting.
What makes this doubly hard for Aaron and his team basically is that when we did that major system development, it was about 7 years ago when we built the data center and really took the town to the next level. Well, those servers now, which typically our 5 to 6 year servers are now 7 years.
Yeah.
So we've already stretched them. And, the reality is, we were hoping that some of this money would help us in some of those areas as well. So not only are we going to have a hard time keeping up with the demands that we're getting hit with, we've got these other things that were planned that, need to be done at some point here soon that we now have to put on hold. And it's for the whole technology team, I think that's a little nerve-wracking right now, because that's the backbone of the entire town, not just Foxborough Public Schools.
And this crisis has just shined a spotlight on how important the technology truly is to all of our town's departments functioning. But certainly our education system right now is relying on technology so greatly. Any questions on CIP? Brent? Rob?
So, it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. More on that, I guess, Wednesday night, the advisory committee. Well, thank you for the detailed summary. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Dr. Bertos?
I think you hit pretty much every bit of it.
I think so, too. Okay, moving on to acceptance of donation, which we are always happy to have these. Dr. Bertos, would you like to explain?
So talking about computer needs as far as with students, Jack and Judy Kersner, they had reached out. They've been residents in Foxborough for 30 years, operated their own business here, and when they heard or had read that some students were in need of computers, they reached out and said, what can we do? We'd like to be able to donate. So this is a donation from them for a computer for $689 to be able to go to students in need. So very,
Fantastic.
very appreciated.
Well, very grateful for that. Would someone like to make a motion to accept with gratitude this check for $689,000? $689.
Wow.
That would be
Now, that would be good.
Sorry about that.
I don't know how Jack and Judy would feel about that.
You could rewind the whole tape. and
Clarify
just
that it's
start again.
$689, which is also extremely, extremely appreciated. So-
I think I better quickly.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Make that motion to please accept with gratitude.
Thank you, Debbie.
$900 for the computers.
Thank you. Would anyone like
I'll
to
second
second?
that.
Thank you. Rob, any further discussion? All those in favor? Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Kersner. Very generous. Sorry about that.
Our fourth and fifth graders would appreciate that, learning of powers of 10 and decimals.
Yes.
They could be in that conversation with you, for
There's
sure.
all kinds of lessons. There's public speaking
Yes.
lessons there. There's math.
Close reading, all of the
Yeah,
above.
I didn't have my reading glasses on, but yes, well, it's very, okay. So moving on to other matters. Amy, do you have anything you'd like to
I
add?
don't think that I have anything else other than what I've already stated, and it might come to me though, and if it does, I'll mention it.
I know you had talked about how Partners in Patriotism put all of the teachers' names up on the big screen at the stadium. They also they took photographs of a still shot of everyone's name so that they could, get the picture of it. And I follow many of our teachers on Twitter, and they all were very excited to share their name on the big screen. So really, at a time when everyone needs encouragement, I mean, we appreciate our teachers year-round. And I think we've all done many teacher appreciation events and, recess duty and staff appreciation lunches and, all kinds of things to showcase our teachers. But I think showing appreciation during this period of time is more appreciated than they're more appreciated than ever. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And one of the other things to mention here, which will seem small, but it is huge for us. So as an example of another part of where they've helped us, with all of the graduation robes, we've been steaming those.
Oh, I was wondering about
Because
that.
Chestnut Hill, who does the pictures for our students for graduation, when they come to pick them up, they're going to be there on it's the Tuesday and Wednesday after Memorial Day. So there'll be times for students to come in, and all of this will be communicated to them to pick up their robe, but it's going to be steamed and ready so they can get their professional picture done when they come in.
I am so glad to hear that because those robes are so wrinkled. And
Yes.
I was actually worried about that.
So
to
they
be honest
have,
with you.
our facilities guys were able to go, and they have let us borrow all of their racks, to be able to hang all of the robes. So that's happening at the high school right now. All of the robes are being steamed. So that way they'll be picture ready for our students and we'll be able to get those beautiful pictures of them. But we didn't have a place to hang the robes. So in problem solving, they've said, whatever you need. So we have all of the racks to hang the robes too.
That's
Excellent.
great. That is great. Bevy, do you have anything?
No, just stay safe, stay strong, everyone. And thank you.
Richard?
Nothing, thank you.
Brent? Rob? Anything?
Just real quickly, and I just thank you again to the food service side as well.
Yes.
I do have a neighbor that is part of the food service team, and she is so proud of what they're doing and really feels like it's also making a really positive impact. So I was excited to hear that from her, but I also just want to thank the team at large, because it does seem like it is important for people to have contact and then, just something that they can rely on.
I absolutely agree, Rob, and they've been doing a great job promoting, what they're putting on social media, what they're serving on Mondays and Thursdays, and, just putting pictures of themselves, all geared up. And the food, today was pizza day. It looked really good, I gotta say. But yeah, they're doing a huge, wonderful service for our community right now. So wonderful people doing a great job, for sure. So, Allison, did you have anything you wanted to?
Not really, other than it was Teacher Appreciation Week, and the teachers did comment, many of them, on how much they felt the appreciation. But I think what I'm hearing here is there are so many players that go into running a school district, everyone from the custodians to the librarians to the food service, the bus drivers, everybody. And this crisis has made some things that were previously invisible, very visible to all of us. And I think we all have a mutual admiration and appreciation, and that goes to parents too, of the role that everyone is playing in this. And to me, that has been one of the positive outcomes of this whole experience, is that we all have more mutual appreciation for each other. And we just have more respect for what everybody does. And I think that is really, we've heard it and we've seen it, and it's special for our community, so.
Very well
wanted to say
said. And I agree. Very well said.
I do have one. Patty Young was a long-time person in our special eds and things. I've just received news from Sharon Kelly that Patty's mother has just passed away from complications from COVID-19.
Well, our deepest condolences to her and her family.
I will extend that.
It's terrible. Bill, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think I did enough.
Well, we appreciate all your efforts. I did want to add that the high school teachers did a wonderful video for the students that is on the high school. It was really great, and I sat there and had tears rolling down my eyes, my face while I was watching it, because it just, you can tell how much they miss their students, and everything they put up on the screen, the signs and the pictures and their own videos and the words was inspirational and just supportive and just so wonderful. I may go home and watch it again. So
Well, in the
it's really
faculty meeting today, they all said they want to be at school.
Oh, yes. And I think in one way, one good thing is coming out of this, that many students are not aware of how deeply their teachers really care. And it's becoming evident.
Yeah.
They are becoming very aware that, oh my gosh, they really like us. They really want to be with us. They really care.
Well, I think the kids will all be glad to get back to school when the opportunity is there. So, would anyone like to, if there's nothing else, would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? And then Mr. Weber, thank you for your help with everything again, Mike. Mr. Weber will, after we adjourn, run the teacher appreciation video. And thanks again to Amy and all the parents who put all the effort into putting that together.
Nice headset, Brent. You look like an air traffic controller.
I was thinking about it.
I move to adjourn.
Ingrid.
I'll second.
All those in favor? 500. Good night, everybody. And thank you, Mike, for playing the video.
May 4th is Teacher Appreciation Week. We want to take this time to say that we appreciate all of our teachers, administrators, and staff from the elementary school to the high school.
We love you, we miss you, we can't wait to see you soon.
Hey y'all, David Andrews here with the New England Patriots. Just want to give a quick shout out to all our Foxborough teachers here in town for Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you all so much for all that you do, and thank you for helping all our students. Education is the most important thing. We can't thank you all enough. And a special shout out to my favorite Foxborough teacher, Miss Lori Martin.
On behalf of the Foxborough School Committee and my own Bellinger family, thank you, Foxborough teachers, for all you do for our kids every day, and especially during this time of our global pandemic. The efforts you've put forth are so very appreciated.
Hello, Foxborough educators. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, and I can think of no better time to show our gratitude for our educators and staff that support our Foxborough students every day. As your school superintendent, I could not be more proud of our school system and what our educators and staff do for students. You continue to show your kindness, your inspiration, motivation, and continued support from our students from afar. You play a difficult role right now in trying to teach remotely, and not having students in front of you in a classroom is clearly a challenge. But you have risen to that challenge, and what you're doing virtually from afar is pretty awesome. Thank you for continuing to be there for your students, to meet their needs remotely, and knowing that we appreciate everything that you're doing. We could not be more fortunate to have such great, wonderful team here in Foxborough.
Education
by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.